Hello, my loves. Welcome back to Bedtime with Mama. Tonight we are going to be reading chapter 16 of the Double Trouble Society. If you remember in chapter 15, Amethyst, Ivy, and Maggie came up with a plan with the other kiddos to try to figure out how to get to Emerald and make her remember that small bit of good that's still inside her. And they thought flying would do the trick. So let's see if they can help Emerald remember that she's still got good inside of her. This chapter is called Jemima Can Talk. They made their way into the living room. Ivy took her notebook from her rucksack, opened it to the clean page, and placed it on the coffee table, her pen in hand, ready to formulate a plan. A broomstick? Don't you already have one? Maggie asked. I used to, but I don't fly much anymore. Flying draws more attention than I'd like, so I sold mine and bought a cauldron instead. Much more suited to potions, me. I prefer walking or taking the train. I like the scenic route, Amethyst said with a shy smile. How come Emerald doesn't need a broom? She flew up to that mountain all by herself, and Maggie flew too. Can't you do the same thing? Jamie asked with a hint of Jemima's tone. Amethyst very calmly stood up from her seat and gave a polite little cough into her hand to get everyone's attention. Her whole body began to give that purple glow, and at first no one seemed to realize what was happening. But suddenly her head was almost touching the ceiling. Any witch worth her salt can fly without a broom, but you wouldn't walk all the way from here to London, would you? You'd be completely and utterly exhausted, wouldn't you? She looked at Maggie. I expect you were very tired last night, right? Maggie nodded. She had felt totally wiped out when she had gone to bed. No, for longer distances, Amethyst continued, you hop on a train or you take a car so you can have somewhere to sit. Something else is doing the legwork. That, my friends, is the difference between flying with and without a broom. Amethyst slowly made her way down from the ceiling, and everyone gave her a round of applause. That was wicked, Amethyst, Jamie cheered, and Jennifer clapped so fiercely and so fast that Amethyst was worried her hands might fall off. Jemima simply gave a little soundless sigh and went back to inspecting her fingernails in the corner. Thank you, Amethyst flushed at their reaction, but straightened out her cloak and gave a little shake of her head to signal it was time to get back to business. Because it has to be a broomstick, because that's how Emerald and I used to fly as children. High into the clouds, every detail has to be as similar as possible to make her feel as she used to. She needs to remember that feeling of being free and happy and loved by her sister. Amethyst lowered her head. Ivy and Maggie shared a look. I hadn't really thought about how difficult this is for Amethyst. All we've talked about since she arrived is defeating her sister, which might mean killing her, Ivy whispered to Maggie. It'd be like if you turned evil and I had to kill you, Maggie said. I don't think I could do it. Why would I be the one to turn evil? Ivy said aghast. I'm just saying, you wouldn't be able to kill me if I turned green and wicked, right? I don't know. I reckon I'd manage somehow, Ivy said teasingly. Yeah, right. I saw your face as those crows carried me away. You were distraught, practically beside yourselves, absolutely racked with fear, Maggie said dramatically, and Ivy couldn't help but giggle. Yeah, all right, I was pretty worried, Ivy admitted. You were fine, though, so stop milking it. Fair enough, Maggie said, laughing. Everything okay, you two? Amethyst asked. Fine, they giggled. What sort of thing are we looking for, then? For your broom? Yeah, well, anything will do. Will anything do? My dad's a gardener, so I'm sure there's one in his garage, Isaac offered. But how will you get into the garage if your dad has no idea who you are? Jamie asked. Easy. He keeps a spare set of keys under one of those garden gnomes, Isaac said with a toothy grin. I'm pretty sure my parents have a broom in the garden shed too, Jennifer said. Jemima's head shot up and she fixed Jennifer with a hard glare, but Jennifer simply swished her hair over her shoulder and looked the other way. We've got a nice mop that'll probably do, Jamie added hopefully. I think if we have lots of options, we're bound to find the perfect one. And lots of our parents will be at work right now or getting things ready for the festival tonight. So, shall we split up and go look? Ivy asked. Let's not split up entirely. I'd say let's stick together in groups of 2 or 3 and meet back here in an hour, Amethyst said. If you're able to get into your homes, I'd also suggest grabbing some salt from the kitchen. Then if you run into any trouble, more like more crows, draw a circle of salt around yourself and stay inside it until you think it's safe again. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to think hard about what else you all can do when the festival begins. We can't just rely on me being able to get my real sister back. Everyone began to team up. Jamie, Jennifer, and Jemima were an obvious team, although Jemima made it very clear that she was not their biggest fan. She refused to link arms like they always did, and kept at least 10 paces behind them as they walked towards Jamie's house first. Isaac and Eddie gave each other a simple nod to agree that they would be a team, and the other children paired up without any rowing or nonsense. They all knew there were bigger things afoot, and that it would take every single one of them pulling together to make sure their plan came off without a hitch. After all, everyone was missing their parents terribly. Maggie and Ivy would be a pair, seeing as how they always did everything together. The only person left was Darla. Who are you teaming up with, Darla? Maggie crouched down and asked the little girl. Miss Unicorn, she said over her thumb. Darla can stay here with me, Amethyst said, hoisting Darla up in the air and then down onto her hip. We've got lots we can be getting on with here, haven't we? How do you feel about making some potions? Darla's thumb came out of her mouth to let her squeal, Potions? I'll take that as a big yes then. Amethyst laughed, but then her face turned very serious as she looked at Maggie and Ivy and said, Once you've got your brooms, you come straight back. No dawdling, no extracurricular activities, no side quest or adventures, no nonsense, okay? Straight back here. Got it, Ivy said. We promise. It's not you I'm worried about, Amethyst said, giving Maggie the side eye. I'm insulted, Maggie. I'm insulted, Amethyst, Maggie cried, feigning offense. Whatever makes you think I'm the one who would ever wander off unsupervised and cause nonsense? Who was it that broke the dozen circle again and got captured by the witch? Ivy asked, folding her arms across her chest. All right, point taken. Although I think breaking the circle was a joint effort. Well, be back straight away, Amethyst, said Ivy. Glad to hear it. Come on then, you. Let's make some memory potions. See if we can get my sister to remember the good old days, Amethyst said to Darla. Darla clapped her hands together and was so excited about making potions she almost let go of Miss Unicorn. Outside, the temperature had dropped, and there was a bite in the air so fierce it practically had teeth. The children were still in their pajamas, slippers, and dressing gowns, and the sound of chattering teeth floated on the wind. Their breath was thick and foggy as they decided which homes to visit. Ivy turned left to head towards her house. Her father kept the broom neatly in the garden shed along with his other gardening tools. Each one had its own hook on the wall. The bird feed was stored in boxes that were stacked in perfect rows, and even the lawnmower had its very own little cubby hole to keep it protected. It was very clear where Ivy got her need for things to be kept tidy. When they visited Maggie's garage shed on the other side of Hokum House, Ivy had expected the same chaos that filled Maggie's room, but instead it was relatively tidy. Although this was probably only because there was nothing in here except a broom with far too few bristles and a pair of gardening gloves and a broken pair of shears. We're not much for gardening. Better for the wildlife this way, anyways, Maggie shrugged, grabbing the broom despite its total uselessness. What happened to that thing? Ivy asked, holding up her father's pristine gardening tool next to Maggie's for comparison. Dad got into a fight with the badger. It kept trying to get into our bins. So Dad went out there to shoo it away, and the broom got the worst of it. We don't need it for sweeping anyways. I'm sure it will still fly fine. Maggie put the broom between her legs and ran a few circles round Ivy, making loud race car noises. I wouldn't want to chance falling out of the air, Ivy said, pushing her glasses up her nose. Come on, where's your sense of adventure? Ivy rolled her eyes at that question again. You know very well that I wasn't born with one, said Maggie dryly. She said dryly. But Maggie ignored her. Speaking of which, why don't we go and see if anyone needs our help? Maggie wiggled her eyebrows. We promised Amethyst we'd be back straight away. We literally just said it, not even 5 minutes ago. Ivy began to walk back around the front of Maggie's house in the direction of Hokum House. I know. But what if the witch tricks someone and we're not there to help? We have magic now, Ivy. There might be something we could do. Magic we have no idea how to use, Maggie. I wouldn't know the first thing about casting a spell to help someone. Maggie held the broom under her arm and looked down at her fingers. If she concentrated hard, she could almost feel the magic running through her veins. It felt like her blood was thick with something fizzy, and it made everything tingle when she thought about it hard enough. Her fingers began to turn a pale shade of pink, and she quickly shook the thought of magic away, in case she lost control and did something awful, like accidentally shrink Maggie's house to the size of a matchbook. I'm not saying anything is definitely going to happen, but I don't know. I just think it'd be good to be on hand in case something did. Maggie looked at Ivy with the puppy dog eyes she usually deployed when trying to get her own way. Ivy couldn't help but think that maybe Maggie was right. Well, a quick walk around the block and then back again, okay? She conceded. That's all I ask, Ivy. That's all I ask. Maggie grinned, slipping her arm through Ivy's and dragging her off down the street with a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure Amethyst wasn't watching. The girls passed a few of the children who had secured their parents' brooms and were making their way back towards Hokum House. See, Ivy, nothing to worry about. Everyone's managing okay, Ivy said, pointing with the handle end of her broom. Isaac and Eddie don't look like they're getting on too well, Ivy gestured with her own broom towards the front lawn of Isaac's house. Eddie and Isaac were in a deep and heated discussion, waving their arms around wildly. Ivy and Maggie ventured over to investigate. When you said your dad keeps a spare key under a garden gnome, I assumed you meant there was only one gnome. I wasn't expecting this. Ivy crossed his arms, his face beating with sweat and frustration. As Ivy and Maggie approached, they could see that what Eddie was talking about. Nearly every bit of front lawn was covered in garden gnomes. Some of them were traditional garden gnomes, holding fishing rods. Others were holding cups of tea or riding bikes. And then there were some very old ones, including one that looked like a zombie. All of them were freshly painted and impeccably clean, as if they were very well cared for. Sorry, I forgot to mention that my dad is a bit of a gardening gnome enthusiast. Loves them, Isaac shrugged unapologetically. Don't know why. I think they're a bit creepy. At least he doesn't keep them inside the house. He promised Mom they'd stay in the garden. But this is just your front lawn, Ivy said. I know, this only scratches the surface. He's got hundreds of them, and they're all different too. There are even ones that sunbathe naked somewhere. But Mom often hides that one straight away, Isaac said. What are the chances the key to the garden will be under one of the garden gnomes in the back garden? Eddie asked, looking out at the sea of little red hats and white beards. It should definitely be one of these ones, Isaac said. At least, I hope. Shall we get started then? Eddie squeezed his eyes shut tight, and the sooner we start, the quicker we'll find. They hopped over the little brick wall and began gently lifting the gnomes out of their spots, revealing brown and muddy patches from where they stood there for so long. Make sure to put them down exactly where you found them. My dad will kill me if he sees any of them have been moved or damaged. Your dad won't even know this was your doing. You could smash the whole lot up, and he wouldn't know a thing, Eddie said. Isaac thought about that for a moment as he held one of the gnomes in his hand, thought about simply letting it go thought about how good it might feel to throw it against the ground and watch it smash. But then he thought of his father's face and how it would crumple if he saw one broken into pieces. He didn't understand his dad's obsession with the garden gnomes, but he did understand how much happiness they brought him. He felt the same way about collecting things in jars and studying creepy crawlies and the slimy stuff on the surface of ponds. In that moment, he missed his father more than ever. Isaac gently set the gnome down and continued to look for the key when they suddenly heard a scream. It was so loud and so piercing that Maggie, Ivy, Eddie, and Isaac had to cover their ears. Eddie almost dropped a gnome on his hands, snapped back up to his head, but he managed to catch it in the crook of his ankle without breaking it. "What was that?" Ivy asked, whipping her head up and down the street to see if she could see who it could have been or what was happening. "It came from near the house, didn't it?" "Forget the broom. We'll have more than enough for Amethyst to choose from. Let's get back there now," Maggie stated. Together they ran as fast as they could until their lungs felt like they were burning from the cold autumn air. As they approached Hokum House, they could see Jennifer and Jamie bent over at the gate, catching their breath, both with tears streaming down their cheeks. It was only then that Jamie gave a great heaving sob that they realized the tears weren't from the wind in their eyes. They were both crying. "What's going on?" Amethyst asked as she ran with Darla in her arms from inside the house. She was followed by some of the other children. "It's Jemima!" Jennifer cried, clutching a tiny salt shaker she'd taken from the spice rack in her home. "The witch! She's got her!" "Oh my goodness, she's taken her to the mountain!" Ivy shrieked. "Did the crows get her like they got me?" Maggie asked, rolling up her sleeves, ready to fly to the rescue if need be. "No," Jamie said with a great gulp of air, trying to calm herself down. "She didn't take her, she just got hold of her." "How?" Ivy asked. "We were heading back here when she found this necklace, like a choker made out of a jagged green rock," Jamie said. "I saw it at the same time Jemima did. It was on the grass at her feet, and she reached down to get it. I told her to be careful. Something about it was off. I could feel it in the air, and the crows started going wild. But Jemima ignored me and stuck her tongue out, and when she put it on, it was an instant, like she was bewitched straight away. Her eyes were glowing green, and so was the necklace," Jennifer explained, holding her hands to her own throat, as if the witch might put one on her too. We screamed and ran away from her as fast as we could," Jamie admitted sheepishly. "We didn't know what else to do. It sounds like Emerald had bewitched her." Amethyst put Darla down, but kept hold of her hand tightly. "If she had been able to speak, maybe she'd have been able to scream for help," Jamie snapped. "I don't know what you're talking about," said a voice from behind them. They turned to look up the street and came face to face with Jemima, her hair flowing out around her, moving through the air like she was underwater, but her eyes, no longer hazel, glowed a vicious shade of green. She was floating at least 3 meters off the ground, her arms gently bobbing like they had been caught in a gentle tide, her feet slowly treading the air. "I can use my voice," Jemima said, but the voice was most certainly did not belong to Jemima. It belonged to Emerald. That is the end of chapter 16. Come back tomorrow night and we will read chapter 17 together. I cannot wait. Sweet dreams, my loves.